As I always say, guys, one thing about Percy Jackson is that they're gonna drop something on a random Tuesday. Hello everyone, welcome back to another YouTube video. Today, of course, we are going to be talking about Percy Jackson Season 2. I can pretty much guarantee that this is not going to be my last Percy Jackson video of this week. If you didn't already know, this week is San Diego Comic-Con. I've spoken about it a couple of times in my previous YouTube videos. Percy Jackson is going to be at San Diego Comic-Con this week. Their specific day for a panel is on Thursday, so literally in 2 days. And I'm fairly confident that we'll be getting a teaser trailer at that panel. Percy Jackson is clearly doing a lot of promotion at San Diego Comic-Con already, and the convention hasn't even started yet. So it's gonna be a big week. Okay, so everybody buckle up. However, today, Entertainment Weekly dropped a whole article that gave us a bunch of stills and first looks at things for Season 2, as well as a lot of sort of insider information that I want to break down and talk about. First things first, as with most Entertainment Weekly articles, they normally do like these virtual moving covers, and they did one for this, and it looks so cool. Like, our trio looks so sick. I'm going to go over the stills that we got in the article first, and then I'm going to go through and break down some of the interesting things we learned in the article. So the first image we get is our first look at Charlie as Luke in Season 2. The very first thing I noticed about this photo was obviously his little, like, preppy little Greek jacket. It's kind of giving frat bro in a way. And I think that that's perfect for his character. But, like, the real serious first thing that I noticed in this photo is that Luke is on a horse. He's not on his ship. Now, I've said this plenty of times. It's no secret. Sea of Monsters is probably my least favorite Percy Jackson book out of the 5. The last time I read it was like over a year ago for my Sea of Monsters reading vlog, and I've already forgotten a lot of the book, okay? So you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm like fairly positive we don't really see Luke on land in Season 2, let alone on a horse. Like, to my knowledge, the first time we see him is when Percy and Annabeth and Tyson end up on his ship, and then we don't see him again until the end of the book, where Luke kidnaps Percy, Annabeth, Tyson, Grover, and takes them onto his ship. And I feel like that's it. Correct me if I'm wrong. So him being on a horse, not being on a ship, intrigues me. Obviously, we're going to get more scenes of Luke in Season 2 because it's not limited to just Percy's POV. But, like, is it possible that we see Luke at Camp Half-Blood this season? Maybe. Is it possible that we actually see him physically poisoning Thalia's tree? Possibly. Keep those in your head because we'll talk about that later when we talk about what's written in the article. Then we get a new photo of Percy in Season 2. This is definitely from like episode 1 because he's in his like Merryweather prep outfit, like he's in his school uniform, and he like just arrived to camp, as you can tell from the background. So this is for sure episode 1. And I'm fairly positive when he arrives to camp in the book, he has to fight like these bronze mechanical bulls or something like that. So that's probably what's happening in this photo if they keep it true to the book. Then we get another photo of Annabeth in the chariot race scene. At this point, we have unlocked so many angles of Annabeth in this specific scene. I'm ready to see footage of her somewhere else, personally. Love her though. She looks great. We get another look at the Athena armor, which, as I said, I wanted like a better, more HD photo of it, which is basically what we got. So thank you for listening to me, Percy series. She looks concerned in the photo, so she's probably looking at like the Stymphalian birds or something like that. But again, we're going to dive into more chariot race stuff as we get into what the article actually says. More chariot race content. We get to see Clarice in her Ares chariot, as well as behind her, the first thing I noticed, I think that's Hephaestus' cabin behind her. I only think that really just because of the goggles on their helmets, but feel like that's probably Hephaestus. Fingers crossed. Percy series has been lying to us and gaslighting us this whole time, and that's Charles Beckendorf. Hey, a girl can dream, okay? If we don't have delusion, we have nothing, all right? But regardless, the focus of this photo is Clarice in her chariot. She looks awesome. She looks badass. I can't wait to see this scene. I know that it's going to be pretty hardcore, especially based off of what we already know, what we've already seen, and what this article gets into with the logistics of how they filmed the chariot race scene, how practical it is. Like, they literally had these kids in legit chariots tied up to real horses going really fucking fast around the track, which is like a nightmare almost, kind of unsafe, but still very impressive. So I'm very excited to see it. We got a photo of Grover with his little pan flute, which is so exciting. And we'll have a lot more on Grover in just about a minute when I get into the article. We have Annabeth with her dagger in front of the Grey sisters' taxi. This is also from episode 1. We've actually had footage of this scene from like a very grainy iPhone camera video like over a year ago. Someone was on the streets of Canada and saw them filming this, so they took a video and they posted it, but it was from like really far away, so it's kind of hard to see everything. This is our first sort of HD look at that scene, and I think it looks great. One thing I did notice in these photos that I really liked, I don't know if you guys have noticed this, there's a bit of a color theory happening with Annabeth and Percy's characters throughout season 1 and season 2. Percy's character is in this very like seaweed green, which I like because that makes sense. Son of Poseidon, seaweed green, of course. And then Annabeth is in this sort of like maroon, burgundy, purple type color for most of the season. And that continues into season 2. Percy's in like a seaweed green jacket and Annabeth is in this like purple sort of bomber jacket for when they're like literally like out at sea. However, in episode 1, if you take Percy in his Merryweather prep uniform and you take Annabeth in this outfit, they have swapped colors. Percy is in like a little maroon type color and Annabeth is in like a seaweed green shirt. I thought that was cute. Just wanted to point that out. Then we have a shot of Percy holding up a boombox during the chariot race. I can't remember for the life of me what this is for. Do they use music to defeat the Stymphalian birds? I can't remember for money. If they do, then that's probably what's happening. All I did notice though was that we did get a closer look at like what the Poseidon armor looks like, and unfortunately the Athena armor eats them up every time. And then the last image we get is our first look at Dionysus and Tantalus in season 2, which is really exciting. Obviously, you know, we saw Dionysus last season, so there's not too much of a shocker what he looks like, but this is our first look at what Tantalus is going to look like, played by Timothy Simmons. So that was pretty exciting. It's not necessarily what I pictured when I read the books. When I read the books, I'm picturing like a very gaunt, like cheekbones sunken in, eye sockets sunken in, honestly almost similar to the guy that plays Krusty in season 1. You know what I mean? Like the way that his face is very gaunt and kind of like sunken in. That's what I was picturing. Timothy Simmons' face is a little too... He doesn't look malnourished enough, if that makes sense. But that's just how I was picturing it. Regardless of how I was picturing it, I do think that Tantalus looks pretty good. I think he looks like on par and similar to what the other adults in the show relatively look like, especially because we're not in the era of the show yet that would be necessarily like super dark. It makes sense for him to not be the most terrifying looking person. Now let's talk about the things that are actually written in this Entertainment Weekly article and things that it confirms for the season as we get closer to season 2. First things first, something that was theorized a bunch, something that has been confirmed since and has just reconfirmed again in this article. This season is going to go through multiple people's point of views, not just Percy's like we're limited to in the books. That's something that everyone kind of assumed would be happening. It's already been kind of confirmed that it's happening, but in this article it does kind of include people's POVs that we will be getting. Obviously we'll be getting Percy's POV. It's going to be including Clarice's POV of her quest. It's going to be including Grover's POV of his little adventure, and we'll be getting POVs of Luke in the midst of his rebellion. Those are all kind of POVs that we like assumed we'd be getting, but it's nice to have that sort of confirmation, you know? And it's safe to say because of these new POVs that we're unlocking, like we should all very much expect to see a whole bunch of scenes that are not in the book, especially when like Percy's not around. That makes sense. This article also confirms something that I've been saying a lot in a lot of my videos because it's pretty obvious to me just based on footage that we've gotten, photos that we've gotten, all this stuff. But season 2 is filmed a whole lot more practically than season 1. In fact, season 2, I think hardly uses the volume stage at all. I couldn't tell specifically in this article, but the vibe that I was getting while reading it was that they didn't use the volume stage at all. That's obviously not confirmed, but that's just like the vibe I'm getting based on how they're talking about it, which is fine. They even talk about it in the article, like, and I agree, the volume stage is like a really interesting piece of technology and it's really cool and it's, you know, helpful if you have budget limits, and it's great, especially if you know how to use it properly, but it's definitely limiting. Like, I think it was fine in season 1. I didn't have any issues with the volume screen in season 1, like a lot of people did. But it's definitely not preferred. Like, if I had the option of filming practically or filming on the volume screen, I would pick practically every time, but like that's not always a realistic option when it comes to the budget. But it seems like for season 2, because of their budget increase, they were able to do a lot of filming practically, which excites me greatly. You guys know I'm a real big nerd when it comes to set production, specifically the set production of Percy Jackson. So that has me hype. The article lists a whole bunch of sets that they had to build practically in a soundstage, including but not limited to Clarissa's ironclad ship, the chariot race scene, which we already kind of knew, the Princess Andromeda, which is crazy, Polyphemus's cave, and Cece's island. Like they were all built practically, like I assume on a soundstage, because those kinds of sets are so big and elaborate, you can't really create them on a volume stage. Like volume stages are pretty limiting in terms of space. So big giant sets like that just don't work on a volume stage, so they had to get practical. It like forced them to get practical, which I really like. The article also confirms a theory that we all kind of had in our heads, that Clarissa's crew on the CSS Birmingham, while in the books, it like the whole crew is made up of dead Confederate soldiers, the show is kind of changing that. And thank God, we all say in unison, but it's expanding the crew of the CSS Birmingham to be like dead soldiers from a whole bunch of defeated armies, like a plethora of defeated armies. And those soldiers kind of like owe a debt to Ares, and that's why they're part of the crew on the ship. Dior actually talks about some of the different soldiers that we probably have seen in the background of those shots of Clarisse and Percy fighting. She mentions someone in like Grecian style robes and sandals. She mentions a Japanese imperial soldier and a British soldier and a French Napoleonic soldier, which is so awesome. And I still don't know who that one random, very normal looking human kid is in the background of all of those scenes. We all know what kid I'm talking about. We all know. I still have no idea who he is, how he's connected. He doesn't look like a soldier at all. But I guess we'll find out when we get there. Now, the next thing I'm going to talk about is I feel like going to be the hot topic of this article, and it will definitely be the hot topic of the show when it comes out. They talked a little bit about the siren scene. They talked about how there are some scenes when you're filming Percy Jackson, like when they're filming on the show, and they just like, they know that there's such a heavy weight to this specific scene that they're filming at the time, because like, the fandom is so big, and there are very specific scenes, specifically Percabeth scenes, that are like so important to all the fans. And the siren scene is definitely one of those scenes. Like, I don't blame them for feeling a whole lot of pressure when they started filming the siren scene, because it's like, the Percy Jackson fandom can be scary. They can be really scary, especially the ones on TikTok, like horrifying. It's a horrifying place to be, truly. However, when talking about the siren scene, this article does let us know that there is apparently going to be a very huge change made from the books to the show adaptation when it comes to the siren scene. But both Walker and Leah are of the opinion that it makes the scene better. So that it doesn't really concern me, if that makes sense. Again, I reference the Tunnel of Love scene all the time when I talk about changes from the books to the show for Percy Jackson, because I really loved what they did with the Tunnel of Love scene. I think it still got the point across that it needed to get across, but I think they executed it a lot better, and I think that it developed Percabeth a lot more than it would have if they did the book accurate version. So truly, I do trust like the writers of the show and the creatives in charge, especially when it does come to Percabeth. I feel like they all very much care about the relationship of Percabeth so much that they wouldn't do anything to a scene as important as the siren scene if it wasn't for the better. And as much as I love the Percy Jackson books, like, they're not perfect books. They're not perfect beings of literature. Like, there are definitely things that you can change and add and adapt to every single Percy Jackson book, every single one of them. So them being like, hey guys, we did change something pretty big to the siren scene, but we promise it's good, that doesn't bother me. Like, that doesn't scare me. I trust them. I believe them. We'll have to wait and see, obviously, but I'm sure it'll be great. They also mentioned that they have added a scene like after the siren scene where Percy and Annabeth actually get to sit and talk about what happened, and they kind of talk about their relationship and where they stand at that point, which I think is going to be a great addition. And instead of them just like having the siren scene happen and then they jump into the next scene, kind of like how they do in the book, I'm excited to see them kind of talk about what happened and what they witnessed, especially if there is a huge change. Like, I definitely think that we need to see them talk about it. Rick also highlights in this article that Percabeth's relationship is not moving any faster in the show than it does in the books. Even though like Walker and Leah do have really great chemistry as actors, like they are very, very good at portraying chemistry and emotions with Percabeth. Just because they have like very great chemistry on screen, that doesn't mean that like plot wise the relationship of Percabeth is moving any faster than it does in the books, which is good. I feel like a lot of people have been concerned that they're moving Percabeth a little too fast. I haven't felt that concern personally, but it's definitely something that I've seen people say. So I think it's nice that Rick kind of confirmed that for everybody, to be like, hey, like, yes, our two actors have great chemistry, but it's like we're not moving them any faster than the books do necessarily, which I think is good. The article confirmed for us, I can't remember if it's been confirmed already. It might have been, or it might have been alluded to, but now it's like it's fully confirmed that there will be flashback scenes with a young Annabeth, Thalia, and Luke. Specifically, a flashback to learn why Annabeth hates Cyclopses, and also just like flashbacks of Annabeth's years before she arrives to camp with Luke and Thalia. Rick mentions these flashback scenes and he like references baby Annabeth. So, of course, you know, Leah can't be playing Annabeth at age 7. And we all knew that. But they confirmed for us who is going to be playing young baby Annabeth, and it's Leah's cousin who's named Marissa. And I think that that's so cute. In the article, Leah said she didn't even know that her cousin was auditioning, which is literally so funny. But I think that that's perfect. That's a great way to just like they're literally related. So she's probably going to look a lot like young Annabeth. I think that's great. Pens across the board for that. I love that. And then it confirmed that young Luke will just be played by Charlie, which isn't too crazy. I think, you know, he's playing 17, 18-year-old Luke in the present day, and he'll be playing like a 14-year-old Luke in the flashbacks. So like all you gotta do is change his hair. It'll be fine. And then obviously Thalia hasn't changed since she's been stuck in a tree for years. So Thalia will be played by Tamara Smart. I'm very excited for those flashbacks. You guys know that. I'm so excited that they're practically confirmed. Ugh, I can't wait. The article also says that they're going to be adapting the way that Luke poisons Thalia's tree differently from how they do in the book, but they highlight that the way that they're changing that scene definitely makes the sting of Luke's betrayal a whole lot worse for Annabeth, which all that tells me is that it's going to be a far more emotional scene. That's why when I mentioned at the beginning of this video, like, Luke's on a horse ? Like, are we going to see him at camp? The background behind him kind of looks like Camp Half-Blood to me just because of like the mountains behind him. I'm thinking, are we going to see him physically poison the tree? Could Annabeth see him poison the tree? Like, I don't know. Something is going to be emotional. I know that for sure. It's going to be rough. It's going to be a hard watch, I think. The article also talked about Grover and how Grover is getting an expanded storyline in this season, far more than he's in the books, which is good in my opinion. The producers said they wanted to make sure that Grover still felt like a main character, even though he's not with the rest of the main trio in this season. Apparently, his story is going to be sort of based on the Odyssey, except it's more specifically going to be like Penelope's story rather than Odysseus's. Rick also said that Grover basically gets to play Indiana Jones on his quest for Pan, which definitely intrigues me, but I'm excited for it nonetheless. I have been saying since season 1 that I feel like the show has developed Grover as a character far better than the books have. Specifically in the Lightning Thief book, I feel like Grover is just this anxious ball, always worrying, always anxious, always eating tin cans because he's so nervous all the time. And this is gonna sound crazy, Grover's not my favorite character in the books, okay? He kind of annoys me sometimes. But I feel like the way that the show is developing him is so much better, like insanely better. So it makes me happy to hear that they're continuing that treatment for his character into season 2. That's what I like to hear. Polyphemus as a character will also be getting a more like modern and updated approach, similarly to how Medusa got a more updated approach in season 1. And if you guys don't know, I really liked the way that they approached Medusa as a character in season 1. I really liked the humanization of her as a character. I really liked the way that they approached her and took like a critical view of the gods while looking at Medusa. So I'm very excited to see how they sort of humanize Polyphemus in season 2. I think that that's going to be super interesting. And one of the last things I want to highlight is in this article, the article mentions chariot races, plural. If you've watched any of my other Percy Jackson videos for season 2, you've probably heard me mention that I'm not confident in the fact that they're going to do both chariot race scenes, just because I feel like if I was creating a show, I'd be like, oh, 2 chariot race scenes feels like a little repetitive, like let's change the second one into something else. That's what I would do personally, but like the article says chariot races, plural, meaning more than one. So we can probably expect that they will be doing both chariot race scenes, which is good. That's fine by me. I don't really care whether or not they do it. I'm chill like that. It doesn't matter to me as long as like Percy Beth gets their little kiss moment one way or another. I don't really care. But it seems like they're going to be doing both, which is good. And there was a quote in this article that specifically caught my attention that I wanted to talk about. I'm going to read it like word for word. They're just talking about like what kept one of the producers up at night, like being nervous for the show. And this is what the quote says. It was the chaotic races, in parentheses, and the ensuing attack from Kronos' forces, close parentheses, that kept the showrunner up at night. Now, when I read that, my first thought was not the Stymphalian birds, even though we know that like Luke sent them to camp. When I read that as like Luke and his army are going to attack camp. Because in my head, I was thinking of the picture that we have of Luke where he's on a horse and it looks like to me that he's at Camp Half-Blood. So the first thing I thought of was like, hello? Did they just give us like a crazy alternate new scene for season 2 where Luke and his army like attacks camp in the middle of one of the chariot races? Maybe like the Stymphalian birds come in first, and then when they defeat the Stymphalian birds, they're like, oh, thank God, that's over. And they turn around and Luke and his army are there. That'd be crazy. That's how I read that sentence. And then I talked to my people on Twitter and they're like, oh, I think that that's just referencing the birds. Like, it's not anything new. It's just referencing the birds. And like, they're just going to make it very obvious that that's coming from Luke and Kronos' army, which could very well be the case. But like I said earlier, we are nothing without delusion. So in my head, I have headcanoned that Luke might show up at camp. He might attack camp. It's very possible. Who's to say? But that pretty much does it for breaking down the article. I swear to God, every time I sit down to film a Percy Jackson video, I'm like, oh, this will be easy. This will be like 10, 12-minute video. No big deal. I've been filming for 30 minutes. Sorry, what can I say? You can't make a yapper shut up when it's about something she loves, you guys. That does it for this Entertainment Weekly article, though, but that's not it for Percy Jackson this week. I can promise you that. Regardless of whether or not we do get a teaser trailer on Thursday, we're definitely getting a panel from the cast, so I'm sure they will talk about season 2 in that panel. I'll cover it like I normally cover every Comic-Con panel that the cast does. Fingers crossed we get a teaser trailer, and if we do, I'll react to that, and then I will break down what's in the trailer like I did for season 1. I'm so excited. My brain is scrambled. I don't even know what to think. I'm so excited. I hope we get footage. I hope we get a trailer. I can't wait. But that pretty much does it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.